So, welcome to another edition of the podcast from the Fire and Rescue Services Association that is Priority Message. And in this episode, I'm joined by our president, Mark Palmer. Hi, Mark.
Hello, Tristan, and hello, everybody.
Good to see you and have you on the pod again. And you've very rightly suggested that we record a podcast with regards to the current pay offer.
Yes, yeah, I think it's important that I know we put out our own response the other day, which you sent out, but I think it's important that we expand on that a bit and let our membership know our views a bit more in detail.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what we do know is that the national employers within the National Joint Council, the NJC, have formally provided an offer of an uplift of 3.8%, which would be applicable from the 1st of July, running through 26 through to 27. That would be a 3.8% uplift on salaries, whether that's the retaining fee, whether that's CPD, whether that's disturbance fees, etc. 3.8% across the board. So the question is that a good offer? Is it not, I guess, Mark?
Yeah, and I know that you've done a comparison with other public sectors with regards to pay over the last 5 years. And other than 1 year, that we've been slightly lower than the other areas. So would you say it was the right level or not? I'm not sure.
So we are told by the FBU that we're very lucky to have the National Joint Council rather than what happens in the ambulance and the police, where they've got such things as independent pay boards, and that the NJC provides the opportunity for robust negotiation that provides really, really good outcomes for firefighters. So I put together this table, which you're not going to be able to see on the podcast, but you will be able to see on our YouTube channel. But what it does say, it provides the annual pay rise since 2021-22 for fire, police, and ambulance. RAG rated, which confirms that for the 2021-22 year, it was in the middle band, so we were 1.5% uplift. Police didn't receive anything. Ambulance received 3%. The following year in 2022 was a good year for fire, received a 7% increase compared with 5% for police, 4% for ambulance. The following year, 5% for fire, 7% for police, 5% for ambulance. And the most recent 2 years, out of the NJC and the pay boards, fire has performed worse, with a 4% increase compared with 4.8 in police and 5.5 in ambulance. And last year, a 3.2% increase compared with 4.2 for police and 3.6 for ambulance. And the point I make with regards to making those comparisons is that you can see there that whether it's the NJC or whether it's an independent pay board, it's not really much difference. I mean, if you actually go into the detail, you find out that fire actually performs worse out of the three. But my view is that when you look at these annual pay awards, they're going to be broadly in line with the public sector. And that includes education as well, because the government has, it will claim, only so much money. And there might be a few percentage points between the different sectors, but ultimately the outcome is going to be fairly similar. So the NJ having the NJC isn't necessarily a massive advantage to fire, and the annual pay increases a testament to that. We believe that if there was a pay body that included the FRSA and probably the Fire Officers Association and other trade unions in the fire service, we would be able to put forward much stronger arguments as to why fire needs more money. But at the moment, a no strings pay increase will be broadly in line with all the other sectors within the public sector, and that without proper pay reform, without modernisation, and I know we always bang on about that word, without proper modernisation, you are not going to get the meaningful pay rise that firefighters deserve.
Yeah. So you're saying about pay reform and modernisation, and we can see in the media from a lot of members challenging the 3.8% this year with regards to we was promised pay reform, and that we know that there's a lot of work going on in the background, don't we? Could we expand on that a bit of just what is going on in the background? But it is very slow, isn't it?
So I think the important thing to say is yes, there is work going on in the background with regards to making changes, not necessarily dissimilar to what happened in 2003 when we had IPDS come in, and we had different names. We had people being called managers rather than commanders, although some services have kept with the word commander. Different pathways, etc. And then there was a different pay structure. So from what we know, and there was a presentation at the LGA conference in Manchester in March, is that the NJC, the national employers, and MHCLG, the government, are in talks with regards to pay reform and reforming the role of the firefighter. Now that in alone is a positive. We have to, as an organisation, is a positive because we've argued for reform for a number of years. The problem is, or the concern that I think we have, is the devil is always in the detail. What is that going to look like on the other side? The additional caution I would have is that this has been spoken about on and off for a number of years. And we were led to believe that this new firefighter role would be delivered 12 months ago. Well, at the moment, we still haven't got any detail. So while there's talk about reforming pay and reforming the role, we don't know what that will look like. So I would treat it with an element of caution. And of course, there have been a number of opportunities over the years to undertake the meaningful reform that is needed, to broaden the role, to provide a new pay structure. And I will refer to all the listeners and the viewers on our YouTube channel to take you back to 2020, when in Scotland, the Scottish Government provided funding for a modernised role of the firefighter, which would have provided a 17% pay uplift. Now, that was in 2020. The uplift of 17% would have actually been enforced by 2022. And that means that the other pay rises in 2023, 24, 25, and potentially this pay rise would have been on top of that 17%. So the pay of a whole-time firefighter, or of an on-call firefighter in Scotland, would have been significantly more had that modernisation programme gone through. However, the FBU recommended it was rejected, which it duly was by its members. And I would suggest that any of our colleagues listening in Scotland who voted no at the time probably regret that decision. So again, there's an element of caution. We've been here before, Mark. When it comes to actually pressing the go button in terms of modernisation and reforming the pay structure, are the FBU actually going to follow through with what is needed?
Yeah. The one interesting thing though at the moment is that we know that the other parties, the government, the LGA side, really want to reform the fire service. They want more for the fire service with regards to funding. Funding comes with doing more work and being responsible for more things in the community, whether it's, the resilience part of the community, and whether it's medical response and stuff like that. So we know that the other parties want us to do more. We just need to get that framework and those processes in place to attract that, isn't it? So we've been doing it long enough, and we've been supporting things, co-responding, for instance, and things like that for many years. So it's just about formalising that process more, isn't it?
Well, it's about having a national agreement and a national framework, because you're absolutely right when you talk about things like co-responding in some services, patient transfer, and the fantastic work that was undertaken during the pandemic. So these different elements of how the role of the firefighter functions is already in place sporadically across the UK already. Whether you take co-responding as an example, there are a number of services that already do co-respond, particularly for on-call, because the more calls you go to for on-call, the more pay you're going to receive, and that overcomes recruitment problems, retention problems. So there are a raft of benefits from broadening the role. So it's already happening and has proven to be successful in a number of services, including your own of Devon and Somerset, with regards to co-responding. So for us, it would be a welcome move. It's really, really important that this happens in the correct way to build upon the localized activities that are already happening and that our members have seen the benefits of. But I'll flip it, because going back to the offer of 3.8%, that's an unfunded offer. And the problem is, if there are people out there arguing, well, it should be 4%, it should be 4.2%, etc. The problem is that the higher the increase that's unfunded, the more chance that there will be of jobs being cut, of stations being closed. Now, we've already seen exactly that happen in Buckinghamshire. It was proposed in Oxfordshire. It is being proposed in Dorset and Wiltshire, although hopefully that might be met with some flexibility of increasing the preset. Let's look at Kent. Kent, later on this month, will be looking to close on-call stations and remove on-call units. And this is all about funding.
Yeah.
So until we get proper funding under a framework with regards to a financial framework for the fire service that is attached to the broadening of the role, then we are going to have situations year on year where jobs are at risk and stations are closed. And once those stations are closed, they're not going to be opening again. And that is a massive concern that we have today.
Yeah. So what we're saying is that with regards to this unfunded pay rise, what we're doing, we're eroding the foundation for this fire reform to take place. Because if we are closing stations and removing posts, that whole community resilience bit, we are losing those hubs within the local community, for instance. You could look at it like that. So by having it unfunded, that erosion will take place, because services have got to find the money somewhere, don't they?
Well, you make a really good point in that, we know what is needed, and we've known what is needed for a long period of time. And this reform, we certainly hope it's going to be the type of reform that we want and will drive the service and the sector forward. It's going to be too late for the likes of those who are going to be at risk in Kent, Dorset and Wiltshire, Buckinghamshire, Oxfordshire, Warwickshire, that have already had swathes of people who have been made redundant. All avoidable if the modernisation programme had been front and centre and pushed forward many, many years ago, as it could have been done. So you're absolutely right. This can't come soon enough if genuine modernisation is going to come, broadening of the role of the firefighter, and a proper, well-funded financial framework. I just say tread forward with some caution, because I do not want us to be building up the hopes and expectations of those in the sector and listening to this podcast, because we have been here before.
So if we go back to the pay rise then, the 3.8%, what is the FRSA's view then with regards to
Well,
where do
we
we
are
go?
where we are. We can't go back in time and make changes. So, 3.8%, as I said before, I think that's probably going to be fairly much in line with other parts of the public sector. So the expectation and the hope is that that will be accepted, because if it's not accepted, then we are potentially looking at strike action, because if the national employers are genuine in their argument that 3.8% is as far as they can go, bearing in mind it's unfunded, that is as far as it can go, and won't be coming forward with another offer. And if there was another increased offer, don't forget what I said about more stations being at risk of closure, more firefighter posts being at risk of being lost. Then that would be a serious concern. So the hope is, I think the best case scenario would be that the 3.8% offer is accepted, and we move forward with regards to the package of work that's being undertaken by the NJC, national employers, and the government, in the hope that in 12 months' time, we're going to be in a completely different place.
Yeah. So what do you think the impact would be if it's not accepted? What do you think the impact will be on this fire reform work? I suppose because then um, there is potential strike action and stuff like that. Will that delay then the reform work that we desperately need?
I think we know that to be 100% the case, because if you are the national employers, if you are the government, and you're trying to broker a deal with the employee representatives, and that organisation decides to go on strike, then unfortunately there's an element of trust and faith that is lost, and preparations will need to be undertaken for national strike, and that's just going to delay any progress with regards to meaningful reform. It has to, and that's exactly the opposite to what we want. We don't want any further barriers in the way, and believe me, there have been a number of barriers over the years. We don't want any barriers to be put in the way to have the meaningful change that we need. And we are in fairly uncharted territory, in that the FBU exec have recommended acceptance. But if you've only got to look at the social media platforms, that the FBU members are not happy with the offer. And they're not happy with the offer because, the FBU have made a number of proclamations as to what the future entailed 12, 24 months ago, and it hasn't necessarily materialized. So we all need to be on the same page with regards to this. It's not going to be in anybody's interest for the offer of 3.8% to be rejected. It's not going to be in anybody's interest for potential strike action to be looming in the future. The best thing we can do is hope that the offer is accepted, and that discussions and meaningful conversations and work is undertaken over the coming weeks and months to push forward with the new framework for a firefighter.
So in a way, we could do with a guarantee from the employers and government that pay reform will be sorted within the 12-month period as some sort of guarantee. Would that help?
Well, again, really good point, because, as I said, we've been here before, and you and me have been around a long, long time in fire. And if you're watching on YouTube, it looks like we've been around a long, long time in fire. And whether it's the Bain report, whether it's the Adrian Thomas report, whether it's the Second Night report, whether it's the government of the day making, various ministerial statements, etc. We've been here before. And my question is, what's going to be different this time? And the answer always is, well, yeah, we're in a different place this time, Tristan, blah, blah, blah. And then it all goes off on the wayside. You were informed, I think it was last week, Mark, that the white paper that was under the previous administration, the Conservative government, which contained, a number of progressive recommendations, notably from the Inspectorate, are going to be pushed onto the sidelines, and we're going to have further conversations all over again. I don't think that's particularly helpful, because if 2 years, 3 years ago, we believed that the College of Fire was the right thing to do, to broadening of the role was the right thing to do, and all the other recommendations, then we need to be progressing ahead with that, and we need to be doing it at pace. We don't need to be saying, well, this was under a different administration, it hasn't got our particular fingerprints on it. We need to be going through a load of processes of consultation all over again, because the losers will be the firefighters and the public.
Yeah, because it all takes time, doesn't it? These processes take time, and it's about, trying to move on with this. And, and like I say, we've been long enough waiting for fire reform, long enough for this, haven't we? And to start again is just ludicrous in a way.
It would be. But, the cynic in me would point you to the fact that the National Joint Council just hasn't really been as dynamic as what it should have been, hasn't worked for the benefit of the sector as it should have done. I'm going to say the same thing again. The NJC itself needs reform to ensure that there's something that's far more progressive and inclusive that replaces it, that has other voices on, including ours, and I would actually argue the majority of what firefighters think out there, to ensure that firefighters are best served. And I don't think they are being at the moment. The evidence is out there. We are still stuck with a pay formula that's outdated. We're lagging behind the private sector. I've never known so many people, particularly whole-time firefighters, who are choosing to leave. I mean, years ago, being a whole-time firefighter was a 30-year career. The wages weren't too bad, and the pension was certainly very, very, very good. It's not like that anymore. It's all being eroded, and that's with the NJC. And we need to change that. And the only way you can change that is to modernise. So we do need to have firefighters doing different things. We do need to be stepping into the space of the medical response as well. Now, some people might not like that. They might have a political view. But the trouble is, the alternative is that we stay the same. We become less relevant, and our pay, in contrast with other sectors, deteriorates even further.
Yeah, totally agree. We obviously know that you said about the pay structure, and you can look at that with the on-call staff. They say there was last year an improvement in the structure of the pay. However, was it fair across all firefighters? On-call firefighters receiving different rates of pay, or the retaining fee, different hourly equivalents, depending on how many hours they provide. And I'll give you an example: is a firefighter that does 120 hours receives less per hour than somebody given 30 hours. Is that right? Should that be fair?
I think that's what happens when you've got people who don't fully understand the on-call duty system, who don't have the affection for the on-call duty system that we do. That's what happens when you're asked to solve a problem that you don't fully understand. We spoke about this on a previous pod. The obvious thing would have been just for that hourly rate to be the same across the board, and therefore there's an incentive to provide more hours of availability. The contrast of what actually has happened, which again, you can look back at previous pods that we predicted, is that people have said, well, if I'm getting paid X to provide, let's say, 120 hours, and now I can provide, now I can earn the exact same amount, but only provide 90, well, I'm going to provide 90. And there was a disincentive for people to provide availability, which was completely bonkers in our view. Great that people had an uplift, but the detail had a negative effect. So, you know, we were, and this is why I'm very, very cautious. We were told, I think back in 2023, that there was going to be proper pay reform for the retained duty system. 2 years later, we found that it was the banding system that was this wonderful reform. Banding system that, by the way, was in place in other services locally anyway. But that's not proper reform, and that is why I am concerned. You know, depending on your definition of reform and modernisation, will depend on your outcomes. I think we've got higher expectations on behalf of our members as to what is the art of the possible in doing something different to ensure that it is more of an attractive proposition as either a full-time career or as a career as a whole-time firefighter. That is not just about pay, that is about the enjoyment and value of the role. And at the moment, that is being eroded. Obviously, call levels have gone down, 30, 40% over the last 10 years. They're slightly ticking up a little bit at the moment, the stats will say, but ultimately, call levels have gone down. And when you're an on-call firefighter, that means your pay has gone down by 30 or 40% in real terms. That's not helpful in terms of recruitment and retention, and it needs to be adjusted.
So where do we go now with regards to this pay offer? So obviously, we believe that the interests of our members is that it is accepted, and that the fire reform work is done urgently, and hopefully before this time next year. So then we can start seeing the benefits. Would that be where we are?
Yeah. So literally, a couple of hours ago, I had a meeting with MHCLG, and we spoke about exactly this because they're party to the pay reform. So we will be using our influence as a major stakeholder in the sector to suggest what pay reform needs to look like. We also separately have meetings with the national employers. We will be using our influence in exactly the same way there to ensure that when this package is delivered, if it is delivered, that is exactly what our members need and are crying out for.
Yeah. Okay. So just to round off this podcast just on the pay offer then. So what's our message then to our members? And
our message is to anybody listening, if you have opportunity to vote, I would vote to accept, would be the view, because the alternative, which I don't think has been spelt out to firefighters up and down the country, the alternative is that we could be set for industrial action, that we will be delaying the modernisation programme. We're not in an ideal place with regards to 3.8. We're not in an ideal place in terms of the fact that that is unfunded, but we are where we are. And we need as many people to come online with the FRSA to demonstrate that we've got as much influence as we possibly can with regards to the modernisation agenda. Now, you and I sitting here, Mark, and the exec and our local committee members, we haven't got all the solutions and the ideas. So if anybody is sort of shouting at their Alexa or at the computer screen about what needs to be done that we've not spoken about before, then please let us know. hq@frsa.org.uk. Use our social platforms. Let us know what you think needs to be done. We've got a number of ideas, and we have had for decades now as to what needs to be done. We've got the most recent research into on-call recruitment and retention. We are pushing that big time, that needs to be implemented to keep that momentum of this new information that's just come out, because again, history will suggest that the older that report gets, and don't forget that was published back in November, the older that report gets, the more likely it is people will say, yep, but that was then. Things have changed, things have moved on. We need to have a new piece of research. And we've seen it so often, haven't we, Mark?
Yeah.
So we need to really press ahead, full speed, and let's do what is needed for the benefit of our members and the public. You know, they expect and deserve a first-class fire and rescue service, and modernisation will significantly help us deliver that.
Yeah. And where you've asked people listening to this, our members and other people listening to this podcast, to send us information, and if they can back it up with some sort of evidence or some more than just an idea, that helps us then to formulate stuff and put it forward. So it's important not just to send in an idea with no substance to it. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
we have both. If anyone's got an idea that we'd not thought of before, let's have that. But yeah, if there's evidence that locally this particular thing is happening, that would add even more strength to the argument.
Yeah, and
But
that's what
you
I'm
know,
trying to say.
we're a member-led organisation, and it's the thoughts and views of our members that drives us in the direction that we go.
Yeah, and like you said, a lot of things are going on locally that we don't even know about. Even locally on certain stations, things happen. Share those things that's going on, so we are aware and we can suggest these things, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know whether you want to take the opportunity to speak about what's happening in your service, because you've been a driving force with regards to pay for availability for the on-call duty system in Devon and Somerset.
Yeah, so Devon and Somerset, they have invested in the on-call fire service, and that's what we want. To be quite honest, a lot of work has gone into it. A lot of investment has gone into it. We are at a point at the moment, we are going through a review of pay for availability. Again, we are having some challenges with with particularly the FBU at the moment, and them being able to accept it as a collective agreement. We're waiting for the outcome of that. However, we are in a position ourselves, and you've been part of this, Christian, that we can actually put a collective agreement forward with for our members and continue it going. So um, I can't say too much about it at the moment because we are at that crossover point where there's a lot of work going on in the background with regards to. I think the NJC are involved, or the NJC are involved at the moment. So um, let's hope that gets over the line, settles down, because it's really what we need to see. We need people to be paid an half decent rate for being available. And when they are available, we want to be seeing them on the fire appliances, riding those appliances. And that was how it is working, to be quite honest.
Yeah, you've put a lot of work, and the committee have put a lot of work and effort into pay for availability. It's a fantastic pay system. Everyone benefits from that system, and the fact that it's being held up for political reasons, maybe ideology reasons, I don't know. I think it's disappointing. So I do hope that the service sees sense with regards to the fact that needs to press ahead, and that any arbitration provides the best solution for the firefighters down in Devon and Somerset. There's
Yeah.
two other things, if I can, while we've got the opportunity recording the pod, that isn't related to the pay offer. So we had those are listening with regards to the Matthew second options exercise. We had a meeting of the Scheme Advisory Board yesterday. That is a national board for England. that is made up of employers and employee representatives. So you've got us, you've got Fire Leaders Association, Fire Officers Association, and the FBU. So that met yesterday, and the FRSA recommended in terms of the compensation framework, and that is a framework to overcome the problem where anybody who's taking part of the Matthews options exercise ends up having a significant tax bill because of the way that's structured. There's looking to be a compensation framework put together. Now, I've spoken about that on previous pods as well, and the expectation was that it was going to be delivered by April. We're now in June. So I recommended yesterday that the Scheme Advisory Board, as a board, wrote to the Fire Minister to express our serious concerns at the delay and the implications of that delay. So that's just an opportunity to take to update listeners out there with regards to that. We still will be doing a separate dedicated podcast on that when more information is available. The other really good bit of news, Dorset and Wiltshire. So they originally proposed to close 8 on-call stations under the premise that they were looking to save 1.2 million. We heard yesterday, actually last night, I think it was, that the Chief Fire Officer there, Andy Cole, has changed his professional advice from closing those 8 on-call stations to keeping them open, with the caveat that they're able to secure agreement from the government that they will be able to increase their precept accordingly to cover the shortfall. There's a little bit more detail in that we're not happy with regards to merging 2 on-call stations, Hamworthy and Wilton, that we're going to continue the fight on. But the good news is our campaign has been successful to a large degree in that 6 on-call stations are definitely going to be saved by the looks of it. And we've got a further fight to make with regards to the other 2, but we believe we've got a very strong argument with regards to that. So that demonstrates the value of having a robust counter argument, coming up with alternative proposals, scrutinizing evidence, a lot of which was flawed, I would say, all without the need of threatening strike action. That's the art of the possible from a professional trade union that is independent and member-led.
Yeah, and some great work gone on with those committees, dealing with that as well, those local committees, hasn't it?
Absolute, a huge shout out to Andy Elliott, to Chris Edge, to Wayne Jones and Alice Elliott, who have been fantastic. And the other thing is, the public have really championed their local stations and the argument to keep them open. It's been fantastic. It's been one of the most positive campaigns I think I've ever seen, and probably is a strong blueprint for how we need to tackle the proposals in Kent.
Yeah, I think we're there on this one. Look forward to the next podcast, to be honest.
Fantastic. It's been wonderful to have the opportunity to be quizzed by you and to try and provide more information to the benefit of our members out there via a podcast and YouTube channel. Very much look forward to doing another one fairly soon. Don't forget, like and subscribe to this podcast. Tell all your colleagues and get them to listen as well. If you've got any opinions on something that we should be talking about that we're not, please message the show. The email addresses are in the notes. And just to say thank you, Mark, for giving up your valuable time to record.
Yeah, and thank you, Tristan.
Okay. Thanks, Mark. And thanks for listening, everybody. And look forward to recording the next one.